The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger. Chapter 7, Part 11. King Garoo laughed heartily at this speech. After a few moments more of pleasant chat, I was dismissed by His Majesty with promises of continued favor. As I was backing out of the audience chamber, King Garoo cried out gaily as he shook a tiny finger at me. "Look well after Princess Hoppa Hoppa, little man all head." While seated in my apartment the day following my reception at court and the presentation of the royal library to me, whiling away the time as best I could by dipping into the early history of the Umilumbas, I suddenly heard a great wheezing and whistling noise, as if someone suffering from the asthma were approaching. Bulger gave a low growl. I sprang up, and upon going to the door was not a little surprised to see Microexalta coming toward me with very short hops, every one of which drew forth a grunt. However, he finally reached a seat in my apartment, and after half an hour's rest, addressed me as follows. "I bring thee good news, little man all head. His Majesty King Garoo has graciously resolved to appoint thee one of the ministers of state. Polydata has informed him that your head is exactly 3 times larger than the largest Umilumbas, and that, consequently, you must be at least 3 times as wise as any of his counselors. He is quite naturally unwilling that any other monarch should have the use of the vast treasure of wisdom stored in thy head. His design is to treat thee like a son, to surround thee with everything that gold can buy or cunning hands fashion, for thy comfort and amusement. In a word, so to shower honors upon thee that thou shalt soon forget thy home and kinspeople." The effect of Microexalta's words upon me were indescribable. I felt as if my heart were about to beat its last. It was only by the greatest efforts that I could pull myself together, stammer out my thanks to His Majesty, King Garoo, and save myself from betraying my utter disconsolate condition. Behold me now a prisoner for life. For in spite of all these honeyed words, King Garoo now proceeded to double the number of guards set to watch my movements, and thus head off any attempt at escape. I, of course, pretended not to notice this extra precaution. In fact, I put a smiling face over my sad heart and pretended to be perfectly contented, to have given up all thoughts of ever returning home. I took good care to let Microexalta know that I now intended to begin studying the ancient history of his people. With the Princess Hoppa Hoppa, too, I was all kindness and sympathy. But while I was thus engaged in throwing my keepers off their guard, I was diving deep into the folklore of the Umilumbas. The books of the royal library, so graciously bestowed upon me by King Garoo, stood me in good service. I determined to get at all the weaknesses of the Umilumbas in order to see if I could not discover some way to elude their vigilance. It was all dark to me for the first few days, but at length I caught a glimmer of hope. It came about this way. The Umilumbas dread water. My own observation, as well as Polydata's words, had directed my attention to this strange fact. Provided by nature with limbs of extraordinary strength that they can leap over streams even 30 feet in width, they have a superstition that nature intended them to avoid touching the surface of a stream. For the first, I now observed that they had no boats of any kind, and their children, unlike other children, never play upon the banks of the beautiful streamlets which flowed in every direction around their homes. "A boat is the thing I need," said I to myself, every pulse beating with suppressed excitement. But where to get it? It were idle to attempt to build a boat or even a raft without attracting the attention of my watchers and raising an outcry. I must abandon that idea. By a strange fatality, my bitterest enemy now came to my assistance. You doubtless remember how that animated coil of steel spring, Megazalto, tried to kill me by placing tiny poisoned knife blades in my bed. Well, after that, I never laid down at night that I didn't first pull off the cushions, draperies, and coverings of my couch in search of any more of the same kind. I never found any, for Megazalto was still in disgrace and forbidden under penalty of instant death to approach the royal palace. But I did find something else. It was this. I discovered that my bedstead, emptied of its cushions and clothes, was exactly the shape of a yawl boat. In fact, of so fine a model as to give infinite pleasure to my sailor's eye, and most astonishing discovery of all, that it was already fitted with a staunch and shapely mast, the staff which supported the hangings. All I needed was a couple of thin, straight sticks for booms, and I would be able to take one of my sheets and rig a square sail in a few moments. Here again I found myself face to face with an appalling difficulty. Even admitting that I could elude the vigilance of my keepers, how was I, all alone by myself, to transport the heavy bedstead to the water's edge, a quarter of a mile away? I was upon the point of giving up the whole scheme. The more I turned it over in my mind, the more its dangers and difficulties increased. I paced the floor with quick and anxious step, scarcely aware of Bulger's solicitude. He was at my heels with vain coaxings, trying to quiet me down. At last, in blank despair, I threw myself in a chair. Bulger raised himself on his hind legs and gazed inquiringly into my face. His tongue was out. He was suffering from the heat. For the first time, I became aware of my condition. The perspiration was streaming down my face. Suddenly, a new idea flashed through my mind and helped out the old one. Said I to myself, I'll complain to the king of the heat. I'll tell him how accustomed I am to outdoor life and sleeping in the open air with no covering save the blue sky and twinkling stars. That I shall most surely pine away with inward wasting unless I be permitted to move my bed during the midsummer heat down by the riverside, where the air is coolest and purest. King Guru listened to my request without the slightest suspicion that my idea of escaping from his domain was flitting through my mind. In fact, he would have as soon expected to see one of his royal beds spread its draperies for wings and fly away into the mountains as to see it go flashing down the river with one of the sheets set for a sail. So my request was granted at once. My bed was moved down to the river's edge, where one tent was raised to house me in case of a rainstorm, and another to shelter the troop of guards, which always kept at a respectable distance from me, and yet near enough to hop down upon me in about 3 seconds. So far, all had gone well. At first, my plan was to launch my boat and make my escape in the night, but I was obliged to give this up, for I discovered that the guard was always doubled at nightfall. Escape, if I escape at all, then must be in the broad daylight. 6 of the Lumba's soldiers stood sentry about my quarters from sunrise to sunset. That they were armed, it is needless to say. But their tiny swords and pikes had no terror for me. With a stout club, I could have beaten them down in a few moments. Their terrible legs and feet, however, were quite another thing. One blow from the feet of a vigorous Lumba would have laid me dead on the ground. I have often seen these guards amuse themselves by striking deep holes in the ground or by breaking stone slabs an inch thick with a single blow of their heels. I must choose a different mode of eluding such dangerous pursuers. They must be drugged. But how to accomplish this? To offer them all food at the same time would most assuredly arouse their suspicion. Then again, they do not all eat together. so too it would be worse than folly to attempt to drug their drink. What was to be done? Again, my heart grew sick and faint within me. I sat down to collect my scattered thoughts. At that moment, the attendant began to serve my midday repast. I glanced at the tempting dishes and sparkling wines. It was a feast fit for a king. Sir Pendulum Legs, said the serving man with a low bow. This is the season for Ululo eggs. The first find was made today. The nest held 6. His Majesty sends thee 2 and wishes thee a pleasant dream. Now let me tell you what this strange speech all meant. The Ululu bird is about the size of a quail and lays from 6 to a dozen eggs in a jet black hue. But as the bird, whose plumage is as black as the bat's wing, makes its nest in the wilderness among the rank growth of heather-like plant, of so dark green a foliage as to seem almost black, the eggs are invisible to the hunter's eye, and the nest can only be found by posting sentinels to mark the spots where the birds alight. As you may imagine, Ululu eggs are worth their weight in gold. Nay, more, the people are forbidden to eat one. Such is the king's command. They all belong to him, and the finder must straightway bear his prize to the royal palace, where a rich reward awaits him. But the most mysterious thing about them is yet to be told. Not only are these eggs of most delicious flavor, but 2 of them are sufficient to throw the eater into a deep sleep, during which the most delightful dreams steal over him. Visions of exquisite loveliness flit before his eyes, and life seems so sweet and satisfactory that waking is really the keenest pain. The cause of this strange effect was for many centuries a mystery, and the ancestors of the Umilumbas were wont to worship the Ululu bird as a sort of sacred creature. But the mystery was solved at last. It was found that these birds fed upon the seed of the poppy plant, and hence the power of their eggs to cause sleep in those partaking of them. I ate the 2 Ululu eggs to test the matter, and in a few moments found myself sinking into a most delicious slumber. And I think we'll pause here and continue with this strange story of the Ululu bird and its eggs, and little Baron Trump's escape from the Umilumbas in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.